Welcome to the Everyone's a Critic movie review podcast. I'm your co-host Bob Zerl. With me, as always, is professional film critic Sean Patrick. Visit us at IHateCritics.net, Everyone's a Critic Podcast.com. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Our handle is CriticsPod. Listen to us at Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Alexa, all your podcatchers. Subscribe to the show, rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts. We will read your review on the air, and we will also give you a Blu-ray, 4K Blu-ray copy of a movie given to us by some distributors. So if you do that, let us know you do it, and we'll read it on the air, and we would greatly appreciate it. If you want to help support the podcast, patreon.com/criticspod is the best way to help support the podcast. We can get bonus content and a credit on the show. And then our TeePublic merch over at tpublic.com, search CriticsPod, or go to IHateCritics.net and click on the TeePublic link. All right, let's jump right into the show, and we lost James Caan this week.
Yes, James Caan, I believe he's 82 years old. Best known, of course, as Sonny Corleone. Are easily, I think, his most iconic performance, especially his death in that film. But I think the thing that really stood out to me when I think back on The Godfather, the other day, before he died, it was a couple of weeks before he died, I just was in my head just sort of restating that scene with him and Michael talking about the assassination of the police captain and the rival gang leader. And it's just that line, bada boom, you get blood all over your nice suit. It's just like, it's such a great scene. And he's so underrated. Because there are so many iconic things in The Godfather that it's easy to overlook some of it. And that scene is such a standout. He's got so much life, so much energy. So he just controls the room. There's that. And of course, when he beats up his sister's boyfriend is another great scene, because as much as this guy is a murderous thug and a criminal, something about righteous violence just feels right to some people. And right. I'm not a violent person, but when I see somebody, who's been harming a woman and harming anybody else, and a bigger guy comes along and beats the crap out of that guy, it's satisfying. And especially James Caan makes that scene especially satisfying. Even as it kind of lead to an downfall. But I love the performance too, because you see so much of Sonny's failures, so much of the things that are wrong with him. Just in James Caan's performance, he implies the things that are going to be his downfall: his ego, his insecurities, his thinking, his act first, think later approach to life. Is the same thing that his father sees in him, and why his father kind of leans a little bit more towards Michael as somebody who could be the leader of the family someday. And that all comes from Sonny. That all comes from that performance by James Caan to communicate all of that. It's so brilliant. And obviously the other one I think people think about first when they think of James Caan is Misery. And it's such a different performance. It's such a wholly different character, and it takes him on a whole other different tangent, because as much as he might be kind of an arrogant character, he's much more laid back as that character. He's much more, I don't know, soft, but definitely just not a similar guy in many ways. Right. People often accused James Caan of not having a lot of range, but I totally don't buy that based off of those two performances. I think they're so very, very different. And then when you throw in something like Honeymoon in Vegas, when you swap opposite Nicolas Cage and trying to romance Sarah Jessica Parker, again, he's very charming in that film, and very exciting. And it's very understandable why a woman would find him interesting, attractive, and charismatic, and not necessarily better than Nicolas Cage, but certainly an option next to Nicolas Cage. Right.
And even though we don't like these movies, but he's an elf, and it's the guys like him that allow those movies to work for the audiences they work for. Even the Sandler movies, I don't know how many he's in, if any, but they always bring that great actor in to kind of, one, ruin their career, but two, hold that movie together so it gives us some sort of depth for that audience. It's not for us by any means, but if I am going to have to watch Elf, he's the part I'd rather watch than the Will Ferrell stuff.
Absolutely. You make an interesting point there too about Elf and what he does in that movie. It's such a different energy than you expect from a character like that. He's certainly blustering and frustrated, but there's like an edge to that. Like this guy might actually snap and beat the crap out of Will Ferrell. There's like that element of danger within him that is kind of exciting. Whereas you wouldn't get that from characters who are, actors who play it similarly, who are kind of would have played it more stuffy and uptight. James Caan looks like he might just beat the shit out of you.
Yeah, I mean, he was just an actor I always liked. I mean, he is my favorite part of the first Godfather because, like you were saying, he is kind of the glue that makes that movie, that moves it from Act 1 to Act 2. And we've done it with Nicolas Cage and some other people, but it's just like if you could take James Caan and like swap out Warren Beatty, and, I wonder if those moves would be any better.
I'm at, like, think of Shampoo with James Caan. I think that's a much better movie.
And I mean, obviously, that's inspired by the Godfather scene being inspired by Bonnie and Clyde, but that's what that's a way better scene than Bonnie and Clyde was.
It is. It's more emotional, more impactful, more unexpected. Yeah, absolutely.
And he's not just a pretty face. There's just a different layer of depth with him as an actor. I mean, he, like you were saying, I mean, he's a hothead, but there's just range there in that character alone in Sonny. And then you go to Misery where he's more vulnerable. I mean, he really is. He may have had you're never going to see him going full blown like Jack Nicholson or anything like that. And that he doesn't need to, but the depth he brought to his character is really is understated, I think, now that we start talking about it. And
it is interesting to, once we start talking about it, you start to think about things. And I know it's kind of a recency bias considering just his death and you're wanting to find nice things, but I hate the movie Mickey Blue Eyes. I think it's an absolute piece of garbage. But again, there's a typically romantic comedy stupid movie where he's bringing an entirely different energy than the type of actor you usually get in that role. And I think it's just the edge of just kind of no bullshit that he brings to every performance that he has. Other actors, of course, would be broad and, like I said, stuffy and play up those aspects of it. And he's more down to earth. And, it's and sometimes obviously another thing I like about him is if you see James Caan in one of these bad movies, he doesn't care. Like he'll just give up on a movie. Like if he doesn't like what he's doing, he just kind of gives up and just does it. and he's not gonna lie about it. He's not fucking with you about it. And I really appreciate that kind of no bullshit edge to him.
Yeah, he's a meat and potatoes actor, but I there's just something that's not fake about it. Like I guess I appreciate the give up in a way that like an Al Pacino would overdo it and try to act harder to make it better.
Yeah, it always makes it worse.
Right. Khan can make it forgettable. And I mean that in a good way. But that's just talking about his bad movies. But he's
talking about Mickey Blue Eyes, right?
He's always been one of the guys, and a lot of it's due to the lack of being exposed. I can't name off the top of my head. I'd have a hard time naming 10 right now. I mean, I know there are several, and I'm sure you start going through them and be like, oh yeah, that one. But he hasn't been overexposed like a De Niro or a Pacino or a Nicholson or anybody. I mean, there's just something about. I mean, he's like the perfect amount of roles and variety that. I've always just kind of been a fan quietly, so it's a shame.
Yeah, and one thing, a future classic I hope on this show is going to be Thief. I really would love to see Thief again. We tried to do that as a classic several years ago, and it wasn't available. And I'm not sure if it is available yet. For a long time, that movie's been off the market.
Yeah.
And I saw it when I was a kid, I think on VHS, but I don't know if it ever made it to DVD.
Yeah, we'll have to look at that sometime.
Yeah.
But yeah, rest in peace, James Caan, and now we will get on to our very short show.
We say that now 2 hours later.
2 hours later.
Another
thing about Thor. Thor Love and Thunder.
Thor Love and Thunder with Chris Hemsworth taking up the role of Thor for like the 17th time, if you combine all the movies. He's still great. You know, Chris Hemsworth is still great at being Thor, and the way he's evolved that character and grown that character in very unique ways. And a lot of that is owed to Taika Waititi's approach. That said, in this particular story, I don't know if necessarily Taika Waititi's approach really worked. The story goes that Gorr the God Butcher is played by Christian Bale. He was just a character named Gorr until he was drawn to this oasis in the desert following the death of his daughter and this immense grief that he was feeling. And he finds this oasis of the gods, and he's drawn to this sword that speaks to him and turns him into Gorr the God Butcher and tasks him with killing all gods after he has a very terrible encounter with the god that he felt that he believed in. From there, we just sort of whipsaw around to where Thor is, and we've got Korg telling the story to kids about who Thor is and what he's been doing, and his dad bod and getting back in shape and becoming, Thor again, and it's very, very funny. And these two things do not work together. You've got Christian Bale doing this intense, like, father who's just lost his daughter performance and turning violent like it's a it's a goddamn Joaquin Phoenix movie.
He's committed to that character.
Deeply committed, yes. And then you jump over to this, comedy that's going on with Thor, and the tone is just all over the place. And on top of that, I'm baffled by this, and maybe you can kind of give me your insight on how you feel about this. To me, what is it about the Guardians of the Galaxy that no other director can get right? Because nothing about the Guardians in this movie feels right. All of it feels just a little bit off. The way that they portray Drax, the way that they portray, Rocket, even Groot just doesn't seem quite right. And it's something about the rhythm just feels off anytime somebody other than James Gunn directs Guardians. It's so weird to me.
The only thing my guess would be they just feel lesser than what the characters around them. And I mean, oh my God, what's his name? Chris
Pratt.
Chris Pratt can go toe to toe with Chris Hemsworth in terms of charisma if they let him. But Star-Lord's not Thor, and and you just don't get enough time to spend with them, and they're all there together. So maybe if they picked one of them, it would have been one thing, or if they spent the whole movie together. But there hasn't been enough time,
Fair enough.
And James Gunn does work them better and does appreciate the characters more.
Exactly, but also like reducing them. I mean, I know they don't have a lot of screen time, and they do have to get off screen pretty quickly to make room for the rest of the story. But like reducing Karen Gillan's character to just she screams a lot and is angry, like there's just so reductive. And Pratt's trying to do Star-Lord in a couple ways, but it seems like he's kind of restrained by what Taika Waititi is asking of him. He's being very earnest, and I know the character is kind of earnest at times, but he's also very, very snarky most of the time and very, very arrogant. And that's another problem with the MCU, too, is that every character has become that. Now that Thor is that, and, Captain America is probably about to be that, since it's now Sam Wilson instead of, Rogers.
Right.
Now that he's handed that over, he's probably going to be that, too. All these characters are kind of becoming the same. The snarky, above it all, Joker, who's just kind of smarter than everybody and making jokes at everybody's expense. And Hemsworth is not so much that, but he does have a goofy quality that is similar to that as Thor, and it's getting kind of tiresome.
Well, and I didn't even like it. I mean, as a standalone movie, I like Ragnarok. As part of the universe at that time, I didn't like it because the character it wasn't a natural evolution. It was, hey, Guardians did great, let's copy what they did. Now, he made a great individual movie, but I didn't feel it felt natural with the rest of the universe. Now they kept that character and rolled with it from then on out. But here they almost went full parody with it. Almost, they didn't quite go that far, but they flirted with it, and it just that mixed with what Bale was doing.
There's almost like an element too, like of a with the stuff with him and Jane Foster. Jane Foster's back at Natalie Portman's character, and she's now Thor, the mighty Thor, another version of Thor. The Hammer chose her, and the Hammer chose her because he asked the Hammer to protect her in this very 90s romantic comedy thing that Taika Waititi does that is kind of funny, but at the same time, like, it's a montage. It's very odd illusion in this. Thor's making pancakes. Like and it's just funny because it's Thor making pancakes. That kind of humor is it's very reminiscent to me of like a Judd Apatow approach. Like there's a Judd Apatow romantic comedy element where we're not taking this too seriously, but at the same time, we're also being very sweet and kind of earnest in a way that you can buy. And that's kind of like, they don't have obviously the raw dialogue that Apatow had, but certainly the sensibility is there in a sort of a PG-13 level. And when you're putting that opposite the fact that Jane Foster is dealing with having cancer and potentially dying, you've got a bunch of children that have been kidnapped and being held by Gorr the God Butcher, who could just murder them at any moment. Because Christian Bale appears like a guy who could just start murdering children if he wanted to. Like, he totally doesn't fit the tone of this movie at all. Even a couple of times when he tries to be a little bit genial or a little bit, off color, he still comes off as very menacing and terrifying. And that just doesn't work. And then when you want to have that moment later where Jane has given up the hammer and she's gone back to being herself and she's, dying of cancer, how am I supposed to buy into the seriousness of that when Thor is still doing his kind of awkward romantic stuff? At that moment, I thought Thor should probably be more stalwart. But then also when you going back to the kids who get kidnapped by Gorr, like after the kidnapping, they're all just kind of standing around and making the same jokes. And like Korg is talking to Thor about, well, you still love Jane, don't you? I can see that you still like her. It's like, children have just been kidnapped. Can somebody have some perspective on this? Like, everybody's just kind of blasé. The main characters specifically, like the extras, are very serious. They're the ones who've lost their children, and they're looking around, screaming, looking for somebody to take the lead in this moment. And even in that moment, Thor can't take it seriously. And then Jane gets a big, like, physical comedy moment where she tries to use the hammer and flies through the ceiling and bounces off of something, and it just ends up looking ridiculous. And then they're going after the kids to try and rescue them, and they end up on Zeus's planet with Russell Crowe, and they do another big comedy bit. And again, we've lost all perspective here. Children have been kidnapped, and I don't think that Taika Waititi understands that when you do that, we're taking that seriously. We're buying into your movie that these children are currently in danger. But then you're also throwing in this, like the Thor gets all of his clothes torn off and the girls are eating popcorn in the stands going, we don't need to help him right now. Let's just look. Like it's adorable. Like they're ogling Thor. And it's like, yeah, it's kind of funny, but at the same time, does anybody have any perspective on this story at all other than Christian Bale? And again, now I will say this. I thought the movie was very funny. I laughed a lot at this, and I laughed loudly. There's some very funny things in this movie. Chris Hemsworth is really good at being funny as Thor. He and Natalie Portman have a very natural comedic chemistry in a weird way. Tessa Thompson can be funny. Korg, Taika Waititi's character, can be very funny. But when you put those relatively big, broad laughs in a movie that also has Christian Bale mourning the death of his daughter, and it totally ruins the ending. The ending should have been emotional. It should have had a big payoff to it, and it feels deflated at the end when the big choice is made by Christian Bale's character. We all just sort of deflate, like it just sort of ends, as opposed to being this big emotional thing, which is also meant to be the jumping off point for the next evolution of this character and the next evolution of this story, which is the title of this movie only is revealed at the very end of this movie as to what that references. And it's like, Jesus Christ, guys, you've totally ruined your own momentum here by by having this be too broad on one side and too serious on the other side. It never marries the two. Whereas, like take Guardians of the Galaxy 2, when Michael Rooker's character dies, it's very emotional, and you're so invested in that after the evolution of his character, after the moments they've given him to evolve as a character and become that person that actually is more of a father to Chris Pratt's character than his real father was. And so when you arrive at the funeral scene and Chris Pratt lays a little troll doll next to him, instead of that being like a big broad joke, it's actually kind of emotional because you've already invested a piece of emotion into that. And then that scene unfolds. I've watched dozens of people cry during that scene because they've brought together both this big comedic thing that you have a giant Pac-Man fighting Kurt Russell, Stone Kurt Russell, or you got David Hasselhoff singing, like these big broad jokes, all brought together, and still they managed to land the ending with this big emotional moment that matters. And Taika Waititi fails that completely here. He doesn't bring these two tones together at any point, and it completely deflates the very serious ending that they're going for.
I mean, Tyga's clearly a talented director, but I think he got lost in his own, I'll call it fandom. I don't know if that's the right word, but he definitely got caught up in the comedy. To the point where, I mean, comedy is subjective. I didn't actually laugh at all, just because I thought it was too far parody. But I get why people did. I mean, it's one of those where I can sit and look at it and go, "Oh, I get why that's funny." And again, your mood matters, and there's all sorts of things. Sure. But I was invested in the Christian Bale side of it, and when I kept going away from it, and then there's another part I want to unpack with you because we're both atheists here, but
yeah.
Basically he finds his God, and the God is kind of blocking the door to eternity. He goes, "Oh, that's for us, not for you."
Yeah.
So as an atheist, like, if you prove to me there's a heaven, I'm going to be like, okay, I was wrong. If you can prove it. So basically they find heaven. The gods aren't letting people into heaven. Christian Bale's character is essentially finding heaven for everybody, and Thor's trying to stop him. I mean, is that not what's happening in this movie? And Bale's the bad guy. At least that should be the. I think that was intended to be part of the conflict, and the failure is that you've got all this comedy stuff that is detracting from the major conflict that he's got going on. Well, and that's the fatal flaw too, is that these guys are out of touch, but this comedy's out of touch with the rest of the movie, and it just. That conflict never really gets to be thought about. I mean, it was, and I spent most of the movie squirming in my seat when I did fall asleep one time. My daughter had to say, "You're snoring in the theater." That's 2 weeks in a row. This is getting bad. And I did sneak out to use the restroom during Russell Crowe, and I missed the entire scene.
You didn't miss much.
But other than that, that's. But I really wanted that, the Thanos conflict where it was just like, he truly believes in what he believes he's the good guy. Black Panther had the same thing. Michael B. Jordan's character believed he was the good guy. And it could have been here, and I just feel like Tyga got lost in his fandom. I mean, even like some of the choices, like all the Guns N' Roses songs. I love Guns N' Roses. But it's distracting from the rest of the movie because it's the same... 4 great songs or 3 great songs, whatever it was, but it doesn't.
Well, and the kid who calls himself Axel, the kid who wants to be called Axel,
posters,
I mean that was never it was never funny, and it was never made into a joke of any kind. Not that Guns N' Roses are a joke, but I mean, like, the idea of a child, of that age falling in love with Guns N' Roses is a weird thing, and it would kind of something to unpack and figure out why, or maybe apply a reasoning to it that has a comedic background. Like, that should have something to it instead of just random 12-year-old from today likes a Guns N' Roses record from 30 years before he was born.
Yeah, he just got caught up in all the peripheral stuff and lost track of the plot, in my opinion. And he's made some fantastic movies. I mean, and
Jojo Rabbit
one of
is
the
one
best.
that brilliant movie, which has a big, broad comedic tone about a child who befriends Hitler, ghost of Hitler in his head, or imaginary friend is Hitler, and Taika Waititi plays him, and it's very, very, very funny and very, very broad. And then you get to that scene with Scarlett Johansson at the end, and just the shot of shoes, and I bawled. I did, and I mean, he's more than capable of this. He did it in Ragnarok too, where when Thor had to get serious in Ragnarok and show that he was still capable of fighting back and defeating Hela, he stepped up. He became Thor again, and he became this character again. And obviously he does. He has a big arc in Avengers that is well played, and so he's capable of it. I hate to say this, but this has to fall really a lot on Taika. Because again, I just don't think he married these two things together well enough. He didn't think it through to bring together the broad comedy and the dramatic emotions that should have come together in this story.
Yeah, and a lot of times when something like this happens to other movies, we tend to blame the studio, but Kevin Feige seems to be letting these directors do what they do. Sam Raimi with his movie definitely had made sure he got his Sam Raimi parts in there, for better or for worse. But I mean, James Gunn and all the guys, they've gotten, Favreau, they all were able to do what they do and put their stamp on it. And so I think you're right. The blame lays on Taika, and it is what it is. I mean, I think this is kind of a failure, even if it is funny. I think the story is they missed a lot of key points that I can't really consider this good.
When you waste a Christian Bale performance like this, it does definitely bring the movie down a great deal. Even as much as I did laugh during this movie, watching them waste that performance and his deep commitment to it that was a real shame. I really wanted more on that. I really wanted Christian Bale to get more opportunities to do that and to be that character and be in those moments. And they just wanted to make jokes, That's just all they wanted to do is keep making joke after joke after joke. And think about what's in this movie. You've got that character who loses his daughter and becomes the God Butcher. You've got a group of children who are kidnapped and threatened with death. You've got another character who is dying and becoming a superhero. Big dramatic elements in play, and nobody can take any of that seriously. And it just, not that you have to necessarily take it all completely seriously, but there has to be a midpoint where these things meet, where you're still making your jokes, but you're also not forgetting that you've got these big elements in play. Like, I can't get over what they did with those scenes with the kids getting kidnapped, and just even when Thor goes to see, they do this magic thing where Thor can go and see the kids. Not like his physical presence can go there, but like a projection of himself can go there and interact with him, and he's still being a goofball. And it's like, these children are facing death. Like, they're facing one of the most evil men in the universe, and you still can't treat this with any kind of seriousness. I mean, it's such a departure from who Thor was. It's gone too far from who he was in Dark World and Thor. Ragnarok was a nice evolution of the character, as was Avengers. And then this just has gone so far in the other direction, in the direction away from who he was. It doesn't feel real. It doesn't feel like that would be the overall arc of this character. I think at a certain point he would, as much as he's, kind of all over the place emotionally and all the things that he's been through, all the traumas that he's suffered, I still think there would be that dignified part of him that would recall, his father and what his father would do in a situation like this, or what he would want to do to honor his mother, that kind of thing. Like, those types of thoughts would still be in the back of his head and be part of who he is. And I don't think we carry forward anything from what happened to him from Dark World or Thor. That character is almost a completely different character.
I mean, for me, a lot of it was almost as if he was Leslie Nielsen or Lloyd Bridges. Like, I really,
at times,
I really thought he
absolutely
went that far a couple of times. And quite frankly, Natalie Portman kind of went there a couple times with him. And, I mean, they don't stay there. They don't stay there, but they definitely touch it. And, I don't know.
Even Tessa Thompson, too.
Yeah.
Same. And Russell Crowe was just completely over the top.
All the way there, yeah. Even though I didn't see that part. It was so quick, I can only imagine. It's just kind of a bummer.
Let's just say there's a point in that scene with Russell Crowe where he says, "You're no longer invited to the orgy." Like that's a joke in this movie.
Yeah, and and again, I guess people are saying it's funny. You said it was funny. My brother said it was funny. A lot of people
laugh. Yes.
But to me, it was more like grown-ups, where it was like, I get why they think this is funny. but again, a lot of that's all subjective, so I'm not gonna. A lot
of that is too is just my affection for these characters that I've built up over the series of films that I've seen them play, especially Hemsworth. I've got a lot of emotion invested in that, and it's a shame that I think it just has gone too far. It's so far up its own ass now. Like that's a real thing. Like that's really what it is. Because like they've got a reference to Matt Damon and Luke Hemsworth, who had they did that joke with them with Loki in Ragnarok, and they bring that back here and do it twice, and that's just that joke is just so far up its own ass. Right.
Like in Ragnarok, you're like, hey, is that It's a different.
That's like a great one-time bit, but bringing that back and doing it two more times in the next movie, you've already used up the comic potential of that. Right.
Yeah, I mean, Jojo Rabbit's a great movie, better than probably just about every movie we've mentioned related. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I think he just took his eye off the prize. That's all I can.
I agree. That said, I think this is way better than Doctor Strange, but that's not saying much.
Yeah,
I don't recommend either of them, but I would watch this 1,000 times before I ever look at that piece of shit Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness garbage.
And I haven't seen it to give an opinion.
You're lucky. Count yourself lucky. That movie sucks.
Yeah, I don't intend to ever see it.
Good choice.
All right, our Undisputed Classic this week, and I was wrong. I thought Thor was wearing the Big Trouble in Little China shirt. I think it was inspired by it for sure.
Yeah.
But this is like my 50th time trying to find a way to like this movie because I really want to like Big Trouble in Little China. And I will say I've liked it more this time than I ever have, but I don't know if I love it or not. But go ahead. Big Trouble in Little China is our Undisputed Classic.
Interesting enough, I did read a thing where Taika Waititi, or someone was talking about the influence that Big Trouble in Little China had on his approach to Thor, and you can definitely see elements of that, elements of like what they're doing in Big Trouble, which is a lot of big, broad adventure comedy in both Ragnarok and in this movie. So it is a good choice to pick this one. Big Trouble in Little China, Kurt Russell, 1986, directed by John Carpenter, is a bizarre story about a trucker who ends up in Chinatown, the Chinatown area of San Francisco. He's just Jack Burton's a very manly character, but he's also a big goofball. Like is a lot of bravado, a lot of bluster, and not a lot to back it up. And it's so well played by Kurt Russell. He's got this buddy of his who he gambles with when he's in town, and that buddy's going to pick his new friend at the airport, and something happens where she ends up getting kidnapped. Kim Cattrall plays a character who knows who took her, and she's going to try to help them get him back. And Jack, of course, is committing himself to trying to help his friend get his girl back. What they don't know, or what he doesn't know, is what they're walking into is this big supernatural gang war where there is this character named Lo Pan, who is played by William Hung, who's amazing in everything that he does. Always great. Kung Fu Panda, Everything Everywhere all at once. He's just amazing. And here he's this character he's got lightning powers, and but then he's also super old. He can be run over by trucks, but he just gets back up. It's a very, very weird character, very ill-defined, but also a lot of fun. And all these supernatural elements are just really, really a lot of fun to me. And I think there are elements of this that just don't work. Like there's this opening scene where you've got a character Egg who is himself a kung fu master or a master of these supernatural martial arts. And he's talking to a guy and defending Jack Burton and talking about his heroism. And it was very funny. I was watching some behind the scenes stuff with John Carpenter. He said, yeah, that shouldn't be there. The studio executives didn't think Jack was a hero enough in the movie, so they made me shoot that scene. So I fucking shot it. That guy's still a fucking idiot, though, who suggested it.
John Carpenter is the James Caan of directing. That is something James Caan would say as an actor.
Those compromises that you see, in the movie, those elements that get compromised throughout the movie are part of, the studio trying to press their thumb on John Carpenter, him going, just fine, I'll just do it. Just get out of my way. Let me finish this. Oh yeah. Also, part of this, I think part of the problems that some people have, and maybe you have, is that there's elements of this that are very much inspired by Asian cinema, and a lot of Asian cinema, all that stuff you see with the fight scenes is inspired by various different forms of Asian cinema beyond Bruce Lee, like going into very very 70s stuff that showed in drive-ins or in dive theaters in African American neighborhoods in the early 70s. Like, if you didn't watch those movies and you weren't getting those references, you might not relate to Big Trouble in Little China as much as other people will. I'm not entirely familiar with them, but I've done enough research to recognize the influence, mostly through Tarantino.
Well, that was what I'm going to say. I mean, you mentioned Thor being inspired by it, so this being better than Thor helps. Yeah. Obviously, all the Tarantino movies we've watched, we've dabbled in some of the Korean horror stuff. Not that that's it, but there's elements that are inspired by the old, Asian cinema. And then there's, even Everything Everywhere All at Once, obviously brings Asian cinema to it as well. So the more that, this is probably the most educated I've been going into this viewing. And it just aligned right where it really was more of it was definitely a pleasant experience. Like, I could definitely go, call it a thumbs up. I definitely appreciate it more. The layers are there, the influence, the fun. I always got hung up on the Kurt Russell stuff, and I loved it, and it was fun, but it was just kind of like, I was seeing it like we were watching Thor, just now, like, well, here you got the Kurt Russell thing, and then this side, and I could never bridge the two together, but actually Carpenter did a fantastic job of bridging the two together. I was the one not allowing it in my viewing experience to appreciate both. So
was it that you wanted, like, Kurt Russell to be more heroic and be more like the straightforward hero, and he's certainly not.
And they didn't. John Carpenter doesn't want to be that. And this time I was able to be like, he's a guy I probably wouldn't like if I met in real life. He's fun to watch here out of his element, but he's not trying to make a likable guy. He's making a guy who can't back up the shit he's saying. I just, the context was never right in my, as a viewer, I never approached the movie the proper way. And it probably stemmed from the fact that I started watching this as a very little kid. Like, I've probably seen this movie like 10, 15 times over the course of my life, because my brother watched it all the time. And then there's the other part of somebody that over likes something and it's not yours, and you're just kind of like, Jesus Christ. And so I think we watched it when it turned 30.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest, I don't even remember if I watched it then. I might have pretended to. And then, but this time, I don't know. It just was different. I was like, I saw it from a different angle and different lens, and probably the proper lens. And I definitely get it now, and I'm glad I watched it. And I think with more repeat viewings, because it is a watchable, fun movie. Kurt Russell is probably the best he's ever been. Like, he owns that. He owns this movie. He's having more fun than he's ever had.
There's so many wonderful things, but one of the scenes that stood out to me, it's like I always thought of, when I was younger and I thought of this movie, I would think about the scene where he shoots the gun in the air and then the rocks fall in his head and he gets knocked out and misses part of the fight. But the one that stood out to me this time was he's actually battling one of these supernatural warriors, and he actually gets him and he stabs him, and then the warrior falls on him, and then he spends like several minutes just struggling trying to figure out and get the thing off of it. It's a great bit. It's just perfectly Jack Burton. He plays it brilliantly, and I also love the way they evolve the other character, his buddy character, where he doesn't seem like he's capable. He seems like he's going to be the lesser guy, and then he gets into a fight sequence, and suddenly he's Bruce Lee. Like, right. I think they could establish that a little bit better. But overall, I really enjoy him. He sells that so well. That actor whose name is escaping me right now. Right. He plays that so well, and watching him get better and more confident through those fight scenes is a lot of fun. And I just really enjoyed that. Like, I think there are a couple of scenes missing, and I think the part of that is like the studio stepping in and like saying, okay, take this out, take this out, take this out, put it out. And I think there are probably elements that might bridge those narrative gaps a little bit better.
Well, he never quite had Halloween again. You know, he had that huge success out of the gate, and then, you know, time tells you, they go back and they watch these movies, and The Thing, a lot of people call their favorite horror movie, and Escape from LA has got its New York has its cult following. This has a huge following. But in the moment, none of these were hits. So
yeah. There's a famous story about them trying to figure out a way to sell this movie after they made it, because they're trying to, so him and Kurt Russell are trying to, Carpenter and Russell are like, so when are they going to start the marketing campaign? I haven't seen anything. We're coming up on a couple weeks before the movie comes out. And it was because the marketing department and the studio executives were fighting each other, trying to figure out a way to sell the movie to people. And ultimately what they settled on was just a picture of Kurt Russell and the question, who is Jack Burton? And people were like, I don't care who the fuck Jack Burton is.
Right.
They totally botched the marketing campaign and didn't tell anybody what the movie was. On top of which, it came out at a time. It came out in the summer, I think it was, around the same time. Well, obviously in the summer, because that's why we're talking about it now. Never mind. Yeah. It was a summer movie anyway. But it came out amid. It came out amid like several other major blockbusters, and they were up against another movie that was coming out that was going to be in a similar vein, but like more mainstream. And so they were trying to get out ahead of that one and market themselves ahead of that one, and they totally botched it.
Well, I think that was a story of Kurt Russell's early, like, not kid career, but once he became an adult, from Used Cars, I think came out opposite Airplane. And I think The Thing came out opposite, I don't remember I feel like it came out opposite a pretty big horror movie at the time. I can't remember what it was. I don't want to say it and then get yelled at by people who actually know. And then this one too, I don't remember the movie this one came out against, but it was definitely one that
it was like three major blockbusters, right, like at the same time were coming out.
But I feel like this one probably still gets talked about more, and you can definitely see the influence of this movie on more 90s and 2000 films. I was, and Kurt Russell wasn't quite Kurt Russell yet. This was kind of the first time he became Kurt Russell. I mean, I guess Escape from New York, but he didn't really become. Did he ever really become a star? He was always like that next level down from Stallone and Bruce Willis and those guys.
Yeah, there was a point where they were trying to make him like a big blockbuster star, but they just never found the right movie for him.
Well, and arguably he's probably a better actor because of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm glad we did it. It was finally good to have a pleasant experience with this movie. I've wanted it forever, and I finally got there. So thanks for letting me have that moment. In 1992, let's see what you saw or have seen. The Best Intentions.
That one, no.
Cool World.
Oh, I've seen Cool World. Yeah, that's a weird one.
I always wanted to, but never did.
Cool World is a story about a comic book artist played by Gabriel Byrne, a desperately miscast Gabriel Byrne. It gets sucked into his own comic book where he's in there with Kim Basinger and Brad Pitt, and then they all get sucked out into the real world, and Brad Pitt's trying to get her back into the comic book, and it's a whole thing. It's such a misfire, and there's so many elements here that could make for a good movie. Like, Brad Pitt's really cool in this movie. Kim Basinger is gorgeous in this movie, and it's kind of like she kind of like is Jessica Rabbit, but in real life.
I was gonna say, I always thought it was like Who Framed Roger Rabbit meets Howard the Duck or something like that, but that's without seeing it.
She's just doesn't. It doesn't work. He doesn't seem like a comic book artist. He doesn't seem like a guy who would be able to romance Kim Basinger in any way. Like, he just doesn't seem comfortable being the lead in a movie like this. He's a supporting guy. That's, he's a character actor, and this needed a movie star, and he's just not that.
Right. Prelude to a Kiss.
Prelude to a Kiss is one of the more bizarre movies. Do you know anything about this movie?
I do not.
Let me tell you the story then, because you're going to find this very interesting. So Meg Ryan and Alec Baldwin meet and they fall in love, but they're going to get married. But she's kind of got a lot of reservations about it. She's very untrusting of people in the world, and she doesn't want to have kids, and she's very nervous. But she's going to marry this guy because she loves him. So on their wedding day, they've just got married, and he seems relatively content. The man walks into their wedding, and they don't know. Nobody knows who he is. He's just there. He's crashing the wedding, and so they try to figure out who he is. And he has this moment with Meg Ryan where they just kind of share a look. And once he does introduce himself, he's just said, "Well, I don't really know you guys, but I came in and I saw you guys having a wedding, and I'll leave, but I just want to kiss the bride." And when he does, it turns into a body switch movie. So this old man goes into Meg Ryan, and Meg Ryan goes into this old man. And while they're on their honeymoon, Alec Baldwin comes to realize, like, this isn't Meg Ryan. Like, this isn't the woman I know. I've known her for a while now, and I don't recognize anything about her, and she doesn't seem to have the same memories that we had before. So when they get back, they're having a lot of arguments, a lot of trouble. You can definitely see that this person is lying to try and cover up how she's not really her. He goes to this bar where she used to work and finds the old man there. And the old man, seeing him, is like, "Oh, hey, it's me. I can tell you this, and this about myself." So what happens is that they then move in together. The old man and Alec Baldwin begin to live together, and he's got to find a way to love her while she's inside the body of this old man. And it's very, very weird and uncomfortable. It's not a gay thing. It's not about gay, because that's part
easy.
That's the too easy part. They don't go there. The movie is much more thoughtful than that. But it's about him trying to really fall in love with the soul of this person, and instead of the attractive sexual parts. And so there's an element to that that's good, but it's also just very weird. The longing gazes between Alec Baldwin and this very old man are just kind of, the movie never really gets to a place where that isn't funny. It just feels like uncomfortable, awkward laughter kind of emerges every time you look at it. Instead of buying into it and kind of feeling the emotion that they're feeling, you just can't get past the visual of it that just doesn't work. And the thing about it is that this was based on a Broadway play where they kind of more implied these ideas as opposed to actually having him be, trying to fall in love with this old man, who is also his wife. It was more of an implication. Whereas this movie, you're looking at Alec Baldwin and an old man and about to kiss, and you're like, they don't, right. But it's like, what?
Right. All right, and then there was Universal Soldier, a former classic on the podcast.
Yeah, you know what? I've realized I when we talked about this movie before, I hated it. Like, I went on about how much I hated it. I watched it again and wrote about it, and I love it now. I think it's great. I think this movie is awesome. It's so terrible, but it's a great, so bad it's good movie. Because I think once you kind of turn a corner on JCVD, and as I have, especially through listening to the How Did This Get Made podcast, they've done all of JeanClaude Van Damme's movies almost, and listening to them talk about him and how interesting he is, and he is very interesting. As a person, as a performer, he's very awkward and very stiff, and the moments where he tries to not be awkward and stiff are very entertaining. Dolph Lundgren is just completely goofball over the top, but incapable of being charming about it. He's like a bully who thinks he's funny.
It's like he's not capable of being a goofball, but they put him in the goofball role.
Right.
And then you got the guy with no real charisma and the charismatic, and it was. And when you watch a JeanClaude Van Damme movie, you don't see the ego you see when you watch like a Bruce Willis or a Stallone movie or a Schwarzenegger movie. You see a guy trying.
Yeah.
And after JCVD the movie came out, that kind of helps frame things for me too. But it's you see a genuine effort from him at least, and obviously he's an amazing athlete, or not athlete, but a gymnast or a
physical specimen.
Right. Yeah, and it's fun enough in a genuine way, but not. I don't know. It's just the right kind of bad movie. It's not a Seagal bad. It's just kind of like its own kind of bad, and there's been several sequels since.
Yeah, which Goldberg's in one of them.
Yeah, I think it might be 2. Maybe. I don't know. I've lost count. But
that's I've seen it. The other one I've seen is the one with Goldberg in it. But I don't remember anything about it other than he was in it.
Right.
I remember Universal Soldier. I can pull out pieces of that one, like Dolph Lundgren's ear necklace.
Yeah.
It's a memorable one. I remember people at the time debating, like, did guys in Vietnam actually do that? And
right.
like, no, they didn't. No, well, maybe.
I remember quoting that movie for a while. Even now, I still remember like when he's like, someday. At the end of, or the beginning, or I don't even remember which way. But it's fun enough and a weird kind of.
It's a fun bad movie. Don't mistake it for a good movie at all. It's not. This is not an endorsement of how great this movie is. It's an endorsement of how hilarious this would be to watch with a good group of people.
But it's a genuine bad movie, which there's an appreciation I have for that kind of, as opposed to,
there's an earnest effort to make a good movie that poignantly fails.
From every aspect of it. The only person cast properly was whoever the woman character was. I can't remember her name.
Yeah, and off the top of my head, I'm missing. And I just watched Roger Ebert and Gene Siskel talking about her too. And Roger Ebert pointed out, like, she's actually really good in this movie.
All right. Next week we have The Gray Man, where the Crawdads sing. Harris Gods to Paris.
I'm sorry. Mrs. Harris Goes to Paris.
Mrs. Harris Goes to Paris.
I typed that, right?
I swear to God, you typed Harris Gods to Paris.
Mrs. Harris Goes to Paris.
Oh, you wrote Mrs. Harris Gods to Paris, and I didn't see the Mrs. So it does say Harris Gods to Paris. So, and busy day. Sorry. And then Wrong is Right. I know nothing about this movie. You told me to not learn anything about this movie, so I will not. I will watch it clean, and I'm looking forward to that one. 1990.
I haven't seen it myself, but I read about it, and my mind was fucking blown. I got to experience this for myself.
And so I get to come at it without knowing anything going in, so this should be a fun one. 92, Nothing of Note, Comrades, The Summer, and Revenge of the Nerds 3, The Next Generation.
Ugh.
I was still making those movies in the 90s.
Jesus, I can't even imagine.
I keep going back to Goodfellas existed. There's no reason for a lot of these movies to still be around. All right, let's jump and do some Flick Sharp before we call it a show. Wow, we really did do 50 minutes on Thor and Big Trouble in Little China. That's awesome. I'm kind of proud of that, actually. How do I get to this? Come on, Zoom, move the shit. There we go.
You're almost there.
All right.
There you go.
Trapped in Paradise, Airplane 2, the sequel.
Airplane 2.
Yeah, I agree with you on that one. Old Boy or High Fidelity?
That's tough. That's very hard. I'm going to take High Fidelity because it's still like that's in a top 5 movie for me. But I love Old Boy.
Yeah,
It means a lot to me.
I'll go Old Boy.
It means a lot to Josh too.
Both movies mean a lot to him. And Old Boy won the flip. I never win those. That's probably one you actually wanted to win too. Eagle Eye and American Tail.
Eagle Eye? I don't know. I don't really care about either one.
Oh, I'm going American Tail.
If you want to pick, go ahead. You can just take it.
Wonder Woman, Rosemary's Baby.
Wonder Woman.
Agreed. Gangs of New York, Inspector Gadget.
Gangs of New York.
I think one of my least favorite Scorsese movies, but it always comes up against Inspector Gadget-like movies.
You need to watch it again. Honestly, you watch it again. I think Gangs of New York is better than people give it credit for.
Really? And you know my Daniel Day-Lewis. I just have a thing. Bugs me. But I should give it another shot. Air Force One, Empire of the Wolves.
Never heard of Empire of the Wolves. Get off my plane!
Air Force One, Saw 3.
It's Saw 3 all the way.
Yeah. Diamonds.
I did the thing. You missed it. I did the thing.
Yeah, you did. Diamonds Are Forever, Black Klansman.
Black Klansman.
I love that movie so much.
Mm-hmm.
Look Who's Talking To, House on Haunted Hill.
House on Haunted Hill is actually surprisingly good.
Right. Tokyo Story. You seen that? And Karate Kid 3.
I love Tokyo Story. Yeah, that's the one for me.
What about Bob Head On?
Head On, I think I've seen, but it's been so long. I need to watch that one again. I've heard amazing things about it.
All right. What about Bob Saw 4?
Saw 4 for me. I would love to see Bob in Saw 4. I would love that character.
I hate
in a Saw trap would make me very happy.
I hate What About Bob so much. Saw 4 is when I started to kind of lose interest in the Saw movies, but it's still better than What About Bob. Ooh, this is painful for me. The Natural or Grown Ups?
It's easy for me. As much as The Natural isn't very good, it's better than Grown Up.
But it's... I'll go with you, but I guess...
You could nap better to The Natural than you could to Grown Ups.
But there are, like... For me, there's this about where you place the bar. And I know it's lame. Like, there's no way... The bar is really low on Grown Up. Mm-hmm. The Natural, the bar should have been good. Higher. Yeah. Spider-Man: Homecoming, Terminator 2, Judgment Day.
Terminator 2, Judgment Day. Yeah. Homecoming is pretty.
Yeah. Face Off, The Producers.
The Producers.
U.S. Marshals, Children of Men. I know you're not a big fan of Children of Men.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of Children of Men. But I think it's probably better than U.S. Marshals. U.S. Marshals is just...
There.
Yeah.
Swingers, Downfall.
That's tough, man. Downfall just for the meme, is pretty great, but Swingers is Swingers. Swingers.
Yeah.
I love looking at those Adolf Hitler memes from Downfall. It's so fucking good. Bruno Gans is amazing.
Lethal Weapon 2, The House That Dripped Blood.
I haven't seen The House That Dripped Blood, but I want to. I really want to see that, but I've not seen it.
I do now.
Never had a reason to watch it.
All right. Lethal Weapon 2, 8mm.
Lethal Weapon 2, but I have a weird appreciation for 8mm. I think what I like about 8mm is just the movie it was supposed to be. Like, when you hear Andrew Kevin Walker talk about what that movie was meant to be, like an even bigger version of like Fight Club, or not Fight Club, the Seven, like even more, in that vein of Seven. Like, the studio just destroyed that fucking movie, and I just dream about what that movie might have been if they'd have been allowed to make it the way they wanted to make it.
Yeah. Limitless, Cool Runnings.
Cool Runnings.
Or Bradley Cooper. The music of Chance, Fairy Tale, A True Story?
I'm actually not familiar with either of those movies.
Yes, neither am I. Get Smart. Sorry. Jesus fucking Christ. Get Smart, the remake of A Nightmare on Elm Street.
Get Smart. Nightmare on Elm Street remake was bad.
Fast and Furious 6, Inglourious Bastards.
Inglourious Bastards.
So the other night, my daughter had her friends spend the night, and this will be fun to get to in a second, although I think it's pretty easy. But they wanted to watch something scary, and we spent like 90 minutes watching trailers. And the first one I showed them was Hereditary. And they were like, well, let's give us nightmares. I'm like, of course.
Yes, absolutely.
Terrifying. 90 minutes later, I mean, we went through everything from like all the A24 horror movies, and I went down the Rob Zombie ones, just the typical. And finally, they went back to Hereditary, and then right as we start the movie, I'm like, you know what? I'm tired. I'm going to go to bed. Have fun. Such a fantastic movie, and I don't know if they got to halfway through, but that would have fucked them up good. I don't think they did. Anyway, Lady Bird or 1 Hour Photo?
Lady Bird. But 1 Hour Photo is pretty fantastic.
Yeah, Lady Bird's one of the best of the last 10 years. Airheads, Police Academy 5.
Airheads.
Yeah. About a Boy, Say Anything. Oh, no, it's not. It's hard.
Two movies I really love, but About a Boy.
Yeah. If it was like High Fidelity, I'd be more curious. I think you'd go High Fidelity than About a Boy. I'm just curious. Reservoir Dogs, UHF.
Again, two movies I absolutely love, but yeah, Reservoir Dogs.
Yeah. 10 Things I Hate About You, North by Northwest.
Again, two movies I love, but I gotta pick North by Northwest.
The Crow, The Last Samurai.
Last Samurai is a really good movie. That's tough. I'm gonna go with The Crow. Recency bias. I've watched that one more recently than I have Last Samurai, but I was reading my Last Samurai review and I was very high on that film.
I'll follow you, but The Crow is similar to Big Trouble in Little China, where everybody loves it, and because we watch it for the show, and I have a hard time getting in the right mindset for that movie because it's not what I want it to be, and I just need to keep giving it a shot. Eyes Wide Shut, Logan's Run.
Eyes Wide Shut.
Kubrick.
Incredible fucking movie.
Kubrick always. Is Accepted a movie or a TV show?
It's a movie.
Oh. A Clockwork Orange or Accepted?
A Clockwork Orange just for our conversation about it.
Yeah. Kubrick always wins. Burn After Reading, Night of the Living Dead.
Oh, man, that's tough. God, that's tough. Whew. Where are you going?
I have a huge appreciation for Night of the Living Dead, but I think I'm going Burn After Reading. The only reason is that I think it means more that it exists than the movie being good, if that makes any sense. And
Night of the Living Dead is like historic and like memorable beyond itself.
Right.
And Burn After Reading is maybe like the 10th best Coen Brothers movie.
But it's the Coen Brothers. I mean, Coen
exactly.
Brothers and Romero
that's better than The 10th best Coen Brothers movie is the first best of a lot of directors.
Right. And I mean, obviously, Night of the Living Dead is more iconic, but I also think it. I mean, it is a classic in its own right. I just still think I just got to go Coen Brothers. And Burn After Reading is kind of underappreciated, I think, for them, but I enjoy it.
It is very funny. It is very funny. Just the visual of that thing that Clooney was keeping in his basement is just such a great scene. When he turns it on, and the glee on his face is so wonderful. He's just so proud of himself. That was actually my runner-up for being next week's classic because I was looking for something to relate to The Gray Man. Which, by the way, in case you're wondering, The Gray Man will be in theaters on Thursday and Friday throughout the weekend, but then it'll be on on Netflix the following week.
What is The Gray Man?
It's Ryan Gosling and Chris Evans as assassins.
Oh, that sounds interesting.
Yeah. That does not tell you anything about our classic next week, though.
So are you going to burn out the rating, or are you going...
I'll go with you.
Yeah, I
love Night of the Living Dead, though.
My favorite part of Thor was the trailers. We got a new David O. Russell movie, which I hadn't seen that trailer yet.
Oh, yeah. That looked really good, didn't it? Yeah.
I mean, and I think that Brad Pitt movie looks fun as hell. It's been in front of every movie I've seen for months, but and even George
Brad
Clooney
Pitt looks like he's having a great time.
Oh yeah, and then even George. I don't want to see it, but the George Clooney, Julia Roberts working together again.
I didn't get that one, so I didn't see that trailer yet.
Yeah, it's just good to see George Clooney making movies again. Doc Hollywood, Inspector Gadget.
Doc Hollywood.
Yeah. A river runs through it, the Green Inferno.
Oh, good fucking Christ. I mean, I think I could probably sleep a little bit better through River Run Through It. So, I could probably take a nap for about an hour. I'd only miss, 3 hours of it. There are three more hours after my hour-long nap. But
it's better
the
than
Green Inferno. I hate it so much.
I want Eli Roth to be good so bad, and he just keeps throwing this comedy in these stupid, was supposed to be fucked up movies, and you can't get into them. You can't be scared. Yeah. It's, I don't know. The Messenger? I don't know what
The Messenger is a really great movie with Ben Foster and Woody Harrelson as a pair of soldiers who deliver letters to people when their family member has been killed in combat.
Oh, Jesus.
And how they deal with that on an emotional level. Woody Harrelson got an Oscar nomination for that when it came out in 2009. It's a sensational film.
And The Last King of Scotland.
Last King of Scotland is just a lot of Forrest Whitaker chewing the scenery. So I would say The Messenger is the better movie.
Multiplicity, Aquaman.
Just to go back for a moment, it's again, when it comes to The Last King of Scotland, it got a lot of attention at the time. I think Forrest Whitaker did win, but again, it's the most acting versus the best acting. Forrest Whitaker is doing the most acting. Woody Harrelson was doing the best acting.
They were different years, though, I think, weren't they? Or did they?
They were different years, but I mean, I'm just in terms of why I'm comparing them there.
Oh, absolutely. Well, and Nicholson was really very big at being the most acting, and Pacino did that a lot too. Pacino does it bad a lot of times. Sometimes, like Nicholson does it in Departed, and it's fun, you know. But he didn't win anything. There's kind of a tinge
of awareness with that,
right? Multiplicity, Aquaman.
Two very different movies. Very different.
Yeah. And you got Michael Keaton doing the most acting in Multiplicity, and and then you got
by volume, he is definitely doing the most acting.
Right.
Man, where are you going on this? I don't know where to go on this.
I'm going.
They're kind of equally mediocre to me.
Right, and I have so much more history with Multiplicity, so I'll go with that. I like Aquaman fine, but
it's all right. Doesn't stick with you though very long.
Shazam! The Devil Inside.
Oh fuck, The Devil Inside so much. I fucking hate that movie. Movie. That's a movie. It came out back in 2012, and it's an exorcism movie. It's a handheld camera movie, and what happens is they get all the way to the end, and they have this massive car accident, and then a screen comes up to the website to see how it all turns out. That's the actual ending of that movie.
God, that's almost like the religious movie who has you text somebody midway through or something like that.
God's not dead.
God's not dead.
They're very similar, these two movies.
In their poor filmmaking abilities. So she's saying, wasn't there like a good handheld exorcism movie that we both kind of liked?
Yeah, The Last Exorcism. Yeah, that movie's awesome. That's one of the great exorcism movies of all time. Absolutely.
Why the fuck would you go watch? Is this a Super Bowl ad?
It's a 78-minute movie, and you're just sitting there, and like you've spent the last 75 minutes watching this movie, waiting for the ending to come, because it's bad already. It's not a good movie. It doesn't have any stars in it. Actors who are in it are bad. And you're just waiting for this thing to fucking be over. But at least you want a resolution. You've invested that much time, and then for them to just pop up a thing that says, "So watch the ending on our website, thedevilinside.com," is like, oh my god, fuck you so much.
What a misguided move.
Terrible.
Even if it was a good movie, that's a terrible idea.
Like, I've heard audible boos in a theater before, but that was like people were throwing popcorn at the screen. Like, they were so pissed off about that. They were so upset. I was just laughing to myself. I was like, that's the dumbest thing I've seen.
I mean, I don't care if you're the Big Lebowski. You don't. Why would you? I mean, that just, no matter how good the movie is, you don't go, all right, the movie you paid for, and I'll go to the website and. That's a good way to end it. What
about people who went to the website before they saw the movie? It's like, what's that? That's the ending of the movie?
Oh, yeah.
But I never went to that website. I didn't even fucking bother. Like, the movie's already a piece of shit. The ending's not going to make it any better.
Well, the ending was hidden behind a paywall, so you had to pay again. Oh, man. I mean, like, I could see, like, if it's like Avengers and you really want to fuck with people and make money, that's one thing. It's a bad move. Bad move, don't get me wrong. But if you want to make money, that's one thing. But
make a really shitty movie that nobody cares about and then ask them to invest more of their life in it. That's some balls. I gotta give them that. That's some fucking balls.
Yeah, I did not think something like that existed, because there's no reason for it to exist. I mean, I would get it if it was on Netflix, maybe. But even then, it's pointless. But you're paying to go to the theater to see this thing. Mm-hmm. All right. Show's over. I'm done.
Go to the website to hear the...
Yeah. I'll see you next week.
See you.
Bye.